Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode today of Think Business Live with Joe Heins, the Managing Director of Flight Test, Technology, and Engineering for United Airlines. I want to tell you a little bit about Joe. And first of all, Joe, thank you for your service to our country. It is very much appreciated. I can't thank you enough for that. And so I want to just give a quick background on you. Entered the Marine Corps upon graduation from high school while in the Marines, served around the globe in various roles, predominantly as a fighter pilot. It goes on and on to served as a chief test pilot for the U.S. Navy Strike Fighter Test Squadron. You joined United Airlines as a commercial airline pilot, and you flew out of Chicago O'Hare. You moved to United Flight Training Center and served as an instructor pilot and in training syllabus development. You were a test pilot. I mean, your background is unbelievable, and now you're serving at United, doing some amazing things. Your team focuses on new technology for airplanes, airspace, and airports, as well as increasing operational efficiencies and reducing the carbon footprint of the airplanes. And so, where I'd really like to jump in is talk about how you focus on new technology for airplanes. I almost can't even comprehend what the airplanes of 2050 are going to look like. But now we're here in 2020. Technology just seems to be growing at such a crazy rate. Studies are showing that just in the job world alone, that 85% of the jobs that exist in 2030 don't exist today. And technology is going to be a big push to all of that. And so when you guys talk about at United about new technology for airplanes, what does that mean?
Well, good morning, John. Thanks for having me on the show, and certainly thanks. Special day, Pearl Harbor Day for all of us, I think, and certainly Memorial Day for those that lost their lives there. But yeah, technology it's a very big and broad area for us at United Airlines, as it is for the airline industry. Up until perhaps the last 6 months, our biggest challenge in the aviation industry was airspace. How many airplanes you can cram in and out of an airport, how many airplanes you can cram and get, because the passenger loads were high. And we've had relief. We've had relief the last 6 months, as you know, from the COVID crisis. The passenger count is down, but we haven't stopped looking at new technology for airplanes. Probably the biggest impact to aviation in general, believe it or not, over the last 30 years has been, the electronic flight bag, if you will. United uses an Apple iPad product, but the other airlines also use tablets, and it enabled us to, and certainly came along at the right time when gas prices were high, drop 100 pounds worth of books out of the airplane and give the pilot a reference that's electronic.
Yeah.
And a part of that is also connectivity. We all have, the passengers have Wi-Fi on the airplanes, but we've got to get Wi-Fi to the flight deck so the pilots can get information to them real time. And this is very, very important in the days of where we have more medical emergencies on airplanes and things like that. To be that you could relate an airline captain to a ship's captain who went out to sea and nobody talked to them as they flew across the world, but now it's constant connectivity, and that's really a big piece of the new technology in airplanes. Sounds like we should have, sexy new toys inside the flight deck, but really that's probably the biggest impact in the past. Now in the future coming forward, there's lots of interesting things going on, from small to perhaps change the aerodynamic shape of the airplanes with minor modifications. If you go to airports and look at airplanes today, you can see they all have winglets on them. The wings tip up.
Yeah.
The majority of that modification was done post delivery of those airplanes. That's a typical study we can do. We have a flight ops engineering team here at United, probably the finest in the industry, looking at some modifications to older 737s to 5% more efficiency out of those airplanes when they operate. And then we also have a team that looks at strategy and they're looking at things like supersonic airplanes, which are coming back. And the challenge there is to have an engine that can get you from the ground to supersonic efficiently. And as engines develop, that will be here probably sooner rather than later in the 2030-ish time frame.
I love listening to everything that you're talking about, even though, according to my IQ test, I have a 1% mechanical reasoning. But so I love listening to it. It's so, it's so high level. I love that there are the brains out there in the world that can do that. It's fascinating to me. I want to talk a little bit about how you talked about, like, during COVID, that you haven't stopped looking at all of this new technology, and that constant communication between the planes and all people involved is a constant. And I want to talk about how you have stayed consistently in communication with your teams through COVID, the ones that are actually doing all the work that you just laid out. Because I think effective communication, especially these last 9 months, has been more important than ever before. And so as a leader, how have you kind of taken that philosophy of the technology side of things and put it into the personal side of things of the business as a leader with your team?
It's a great question, John, because actually prior to this spring, my team was several different teams that were not connected. We did work on similar projects, but not together as a team.
Yeah.
Due to COVID, the airline industry obviously had to cut costs, and part of that cost was labor. So we offered a lot of opportunity for folks to take a voluntary leave of absence, a voluntary separation, but that brought our workforce down, and it brought essentially our 4 groups that we have now together. And we were very, very lucky, as we have a very, very talented, the same individual, John Merritt, who brought us the airline this, also brought us together in teams. And he worked very, very hard to ensure that everyone had the right software, everyone had the right equipment. And then we started pacing meetings to get together, get to know each other. And we would use the team's technology as best we could, as far as posting information, as far as having meetings, and as far as just getting to know what work we each do.
Yeah.
And that, John, that's allowed us to do a couple of things. And not only are we continually working on some pretty exciting technology around airplanes, and one I didn't mention is a technology that essentially turns night into day and turns clear clouds into clear, and that's enhanced flight vision system. Ryan Smith.
Wow.
Is leading that effort. We think that technology is going to come in only a few years to our airline. But in the meantime,
that's wild technology. Yeah, that's unbelievable.
A couple of other challenges came up and became part of our norm in the last 6 months. And one of them you may have seen in the news was the airflow study credited to the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, as well as maybe the U.S. Transportation Command. And actually, those agencies came to United and said, would you work with us on testing the airflow and validating the airflow in the cabin? And which we did. Our test planning team got together, put that test plan together, got an airplane, conducted those tests, released hundreds of billions of particles into the cabin on every flight, and measured how quickly those particles left the cabin. We used some mannequins with masks as coughers, simulating coughs, and mannequins with masks simulating, again, just a person sitting there, and found that very few of the particles actually made it to the other people, even if they're sitting next to each other. So that study was backed up by Harvard, showing the airplane environment, because of the rapid air circulation, very, very safe and great place to travel. The other concern would be maybe airports and hotels, but that's a different story. But we know the airplanes are very, very safe.
Yeah, I've heard of and talked to a lot of people who have traveled, and they've said it's been an amazing experience. Actually, an amazing experience. They've never felt safer. They felt like everything was not only safe, but they had they had so much room. I mean, it's been a very great experience. Hey, I want to ask you a little bit about, I want to go back for 1 second and talk about, because I think right now, a lot of companies throughout the country, the world really, are having new people on their teams. And because of COVID, things have shifted teams around and put new people in different places. And what's the secret for, and what have you done to really just kind of get them collaborating? I know you mentioned teams and things of that nature, but what are some other things? I just want to talk about that for another minute or two. What are some other things you've done to kind of really bring them together, and for you as a leader to get to know them? Because that's during a time where everybody not only is trying to, school their kids at home and figure out about life, and there's, more fear in the environment right now. How have you been able to kind of nurture that as a leader?
It's very challenging in the team's environment, certainly, John. But um, as a leader, leader in the world today is a lot of influence and relationships, as we all
Mm-hmm.
know. But more importantly, when you have an environment like this where everything's different, right? The news is different every day. The disease is out there. We're on teams. We're a different team. We're new people. The first thing you've got to think about is you have to inspire people. They've got to want to come to work and do their best. And it's tough to do. I mean, it's tough for everyone to do in this environment to think about every day. So you have to think about leadership as a collective inspiration. You've got to inspire people. They have to inspire you. So in order to do that, you've got to get to know them. And so
Yeah.
you have a lot of one-on-ones, even with not only your directs, but everyone in the organization. And then you bring in, when you have meetings with your leadership staff, you bring in uh, folks from each team and maybe introduce themselves and talk to each other. And as well as when you have an all hands teams meeting, you highlight recognition. But when you do highlight recognition, you ensure that if they haven't had a chance, that person comes up, turns their camera on, introduces themselves, and talks to the team, and then opens it up for any questions. We
Yeah.
do a lot of sidebar meetings like that too, and we're a little bit lucky in that we were working the similar projects, just not together, and now we're working them together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important. You're talking about, turning your camera on, saying hello, introducing yourself. And people want to, it's harder to get to know people only over video and Teams. But all of that extra relationship building, relationship capital, sharing, it's also important. So, I appreciate you sharing that, because it's so simple, it's complicated for a lot of people. And I think we need the reminders, especially because there's a lot of Zoom fatigue, Teams fatigue, right? There's a lot of that fatigue going on. And, it's going to be around for a while. So we all have to get used to it. And so I appreciate you bringing that up. I want to chat about, operational efficiencies. I'm always fascinated when I fly. I feel like there's X amount of time we have to get off the plane, and then the luggage shows up, and it goes from A to B, and like everything seems to be run so tightly in an airline, like by the minute, right? Like, and so it always, just from a business perspective, it always impresses me, because everything has to run in sync, because you have a certain amount of time. And so on top of all the other operational elements of things, how does the airplane look at, hey, how do we make something that's already efficient even more efficient? Because I think that's what everybody's trying to do right now, right? Reinvent what's working to make it work better. That's what innovation is all about. And so how do you guys examine stuff like that?
Well, we know, John, that there's only a finite amount of people we have and a finite amount of time we have. So we look at the gate. The gate itself is a commodity, right? We need to get an airplane on the gate and off the gate. But it's bigger than that. We need to get airplanes out of an airport so we can get airplanes into an airport and
Mm-hmm.
utilize the gate. So to your point, everything is focused on that gate and what can we do to reduce the turn time at the gate.
Yeah.
We've done this for years, and we have great measurements. We know how long it takes to load a plane, and we know how long it takes to unload a plane. And when you go from airline to airline, you see different techniques, and they probably have changed that technique 4 or 5 times over the last 10 years. So no one really has a solution to the perfect boarding process. So
Yeah.
really, where you focus is on the ramp, in loading and unloading of baggage, as well as receipt when the airplane arrives. As the airplane comes to the gate, do the chalks get in to stop the wheels?
Yeah.
Do the cargo doors get open? Those are the things you can work on. And I can tell you what our airport ops folks have done. If they've even gone out and send the folks on the ramp to essentially Indy pit car training, see how quickly they turn a car out of the pits in a NASCAR race.
Yeah.
And kind of get that same type of pacing and same type of work as an airplane comes in. The doors come open, the bags get unloaded, the next bags are already waiting. So that's really where the focus. Where we have challenges, and every airline has challenges, is when the weather interrupts us or the conditions interrupt us and we don't have our normal pacing. It's not standard anymore. That's when you really rely on the leadership of your people, right? That's where you've got to rely on your people to be able to make decisions without outside the standard, without feeling like they can't make it.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done at United, is given our frontline supervisors those decision-making tools. So when something goes irregular to the operation, they can make a decision and get it back on pace. And I think that's a single place where we know that 70% of our delays are from weather. We know that.
Yeah.
So the single place we can get more efficiencies is when delays start to drive irregular operations.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. All right. I want to rewind a couple decades, Joe, and go back and talk a little bit about you. You are born and raised in upstate New York and entered the Marine Corps upon graduation from high school. You know, my son is a senior in high school, and he's a baby to me, right? You know, so I can't imagine him going into the service right now. You know, share with me what your calling was for your path out of high school.
Well, that's a good question, John. I think that to your point, a lot of young kids in high school maybe don't have a path or don't have an idea. And so I was lucky enough to have a best friend on the street. But I can tell you, everyone on my street, I wouldn't say everyone, but about every other house had a son in Vietnam. And it was about the end of the Vietnam War. Some of those folks were returning, and they were looked at the time as heroes to obviously a young person. So my friend and I decided we could join the service, and we're going to join the Marines. They're the best ones, right? At least in our minds at that time. So I think that's was my inspiration, was actually what I considered the heroes on my street.
Yeah.
Came back and served our country. And
Yeah.
as it turns out, it was a launching point for a career that I had never, when I entered the Marines, I never said, I'm going to go fly airplanes. Never said that. And just by fate and a little bit of luck, it worked out that way.
Yeah. Well, it's what I love about it is, I don't know if I believe in luck, but I definitely believe in, you know, following your path, and then luck kind of shows itself, and the universe kind of putting that next step in front of you. But I think you bring up a really good point. It's like, you can never really kind of shape your whole, you know, like, hey, this is unless, you know, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D, right? Like if somebody had said to me, hey, for you to be a business coach, you have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, you know, go through all of this. You know, you never know sometimes how it's going to plan. So, you know, when that guidance and advice is, it's great. What was one of the number one things you learned when in the Marines?
You know, the Marines will tell you, every Marine will tell you this. It's a saying they had. You could say that dozen different ways, but if you take care of the little things, the big things will take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way they started that in the Marine Corps was, well, if you shine your shoes, and you may have heard different variants of this, and I think it was Admiral McRaven. I believe he says, you make your bed in the morning before you change the world. You got to make your bed in the morning. It's kind of the same thing. You take care of the little things, and the big things will take care of themselves. And it's so true in life. It's pay attention to the details, right?
Yeah.
That's what the Marines probably took away. I will tell a little story about the Marine Corps.
I want to hear it.
So the Marine Corps, we had, I believe it was 14 leadership skills you were supposed to have. And you had to memorize them when you're going through officer candidate school. And every Saturday at officer candidate school, we'd have an inspection of your uniform and your knowledge. And if one person failed, nobody got Sunday off. Right?
So that's accountability. That's
right.
Yeah.
So one Saturday afternoon, we're going through the inspection, and the drill instructor gets to the final officer candidate, and he's about a 90-pound kid from Boston who doesn't look good in a uniform, as you imagine.
Yeah.
Wants to be a pilot, right? And so he brings his rifle up, and the drill instructor looks at his rifle, and he looks at his uniform, and looks at his helmet. He says, your uniform's perfect, your rifle's clean, your boots are shined. You got a great, shave, but you still look like a sea bag sandwich. He said, let's check your knowledge. What's the most important leadership skill you can have? And the kid goes silent. And the rest of us are going, oh, man, we're going to be here a Sunday. And after about 45 seconds, he blurts out, knowledge, platoon sergeant. And the guy looks at him and goes, knowledge? Why is knowledge the most important? And again, he goes silent. And about 45 seconds, he blurts out, and without knowledge, you wouldn't know the other 13 skills. And of course, everybody cracked up, and we got Sunday off. But it was it's just an example of even the Marine Corps tries to give you all this stuff you're supposed to memorize.
Yeah.
When in truth, leadership, I think, is much more simpler than that. And what they did teach me about leadership, as we talked about earlier, inspire, connect, right? And then, you better have some empathy. You better get some feedback from your audience so you're able to change direction very rapidly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Your story makes me think of, I love that. I mean, I love the discipline of the story and everything that you needed to do and memorize. But it also makes me think of the story about Albert Einstein. And the story goes, they would ask him his phone number, and he would go to the phone book and look it up, and people would say, Mr. Einstein, you're one of the smartest people in the world. You don't know your phone number? And he would say, I don't like to waste my brain power with information that's easily accessible. Yeah. All right, good. So I just needed to know a little bit about you. I want to go back to the airlines for a minute. We're sitting here, December 7th, 2020. What does flying, and I don't even know if you can answer this, but what does flying look like 20 years from today?
And then it's just opinion, the airplanes we buy today, and we are at United still buying airplanes, we're financing differently so we could save some cash, we'll be flying in 20 years. So the airplanes we're bringing off the assembly line will be here in 20 years. So unbelievably, it will look remarkably like what we're doing today, with some modifications to those airplanes as they age.
Yeah.
There will be supersonic flight. The challenge of supersonic flight is, in the FAA reauthorization bill changed this, is boom. The FAA reauthorization bill changed the language that restricted from no supersonic flight over the U.S. to just reducing the noise level. And so NASA is working on reducing that noise level so you get no supersonic boom. Some of the vendors right now that have supersonic airplanes are just focusing on transatlantic and trans-Pacific flights. So I think the age of if you remember the Concorde and the back and forth, I think that's coming back and forth to Europe. I think efficiency demands it. The other thing we're doing at United is biofuels. So you're going to see more and more use of biofuels instead of just straight jet fuel. And although the carbon emissions out of the airplane is relatively the same, it's the carbon emissions that are much less to produce biofuel. So we're looking at that. One of the things that my group is focused on is reducing the carbon emissions, and we're not going to get touchdowns there. It'll all be just 1, 2, 3 yards at a time, 1%, 2%, 3%. And Scott Kirby, our CEO, is committed to reducing our carbon emissions by 50% by 2050.
It's beautiful.
So you could see some different engines, different fuel, modifications to the fuselage, simple things. One of the things the military is looking at, and we're looking at it also, is if you look at an airplane, kind of hard to imagine it now, but you see the windshield wipers are kind of like a car. They're stowed horizontally. Well, that is tremendous amount of drag, believe it or not, when you're flying at 500 or 600 miles an hour. And the 787, which is one of our airplanes, which is a relatively newer design, the windshield wipers are stored vertically, reducing the drag. So, I mean, little tiny things like that are going to happen that, won't be earth shattering to the general public, but it'll definitely make a big difference in our carbon emissions.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait till travel is fully back because I love flying in a plane. It is I love flying. It is so relaxing. I love flying United. It's so relaxing. It is, to just be up in the air, away, to really unplug. It's one of the best places to unplug and relax. And I can't wait. You ready for a quick speed round, Joe?
Sure.
All right. Best piece of wisdom a mentor ever gave you?
The best piece of wisdom a mentor ever gave me. I say this jokingly. My mentor said this to me once, but of course it's a joke. He said, "A task passed is a task accomplished," but that's actually just a joke. So, I'll go back to people. It's you should know your people on a personal level and what they care about, and you don't know that in a casual conversation. And doesn't mean you dig into their personal lives,
right?
But you find out more about them so that you understand them and what motivates them and what they care about. And
I agree.
I can give you a little example, another little story about how sometimes it'll shock you. I was working a Habitat for Humanity project with a bunch of folks from United. And everybody in United really enjoys being here and serving the public. They really look at it as service. And I was having problems communicating with this one person because they would answer me in one syllable words. Yes, no, very, kind of abrupt. And I recognized that mannerisms, that's just like people where I grew up in upstate New York. So I was able to kind of find out she grew up in the same area and things like that. And despite her abrupt mannerisms, at the end of the day, she told me, "Oh, I love it because I really love people and love helping them." And it would never come across an initial contact.
Yeah.
It really took. So that's just an example. You really got to dig down, and again, not dragging anything out of them, but sometimes the people that can seem very disinterested are in fact very interested and want to be engaged and want to be involved, and you really got to find that out.
Spoken like a true leader. That's a drop mic comment. That is that's what defines an exceptional leader to a good leader, because that is absolutely spot on. I find that all the time, and it's the leader's responsibility to find that peace in that person. It's the leader's responsibility to get that person comfortable, to keep on talking, to find out their driver, and to never judge a book by its cover. If they're the right person in the right seat and they need to be there, that's great. That was beautifully said. Joe, favorite book and why?
Favorite book? My wife can figure this out because you'd ask her book and movie, Dr. Chivago, because it has romance, it has wartime strife, and it has everything that's in a great movie. Mountains, wildflowers, the bad government, the evil villain, and the hero that's trying to work through everything.
So, I never read that book, and but I just watched this TV show on HBO Max called Flight Attendant. I don't know if you saw it. It's anyway. So she meets this guy, and he's reading some book. I can't remember off the top of my head. And he says to her, "Have you read it?" She goes, "I'm a Dr. Chivago type of person." That's yeah. So yeah. Last question. Fast forward 100 years. What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, I think my legacy would 100 years from now. I think first and foremost should be in my family, that they remember me and can look back. Now that we have Ancestry.com, obviously we're challenged, but we can still look back. And I think 100 years from now they'll be able to look back. And when they do look back, I hope they see that I really enjoyed family and really loved every one of them.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I would like to just know that here at United or the Marine Corps, that it had an impact. It did something impactful for the good of not only the organization, but the industry, the airline industry. And as aviation is, I won't say it's uniquely American, but it's America's its birthplace. It's in our blood, right? It's about freedom. It's about flying. And I would like to be known as someone who had an impact on aviation.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Joe, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking time to share your thoughts and learn a little bit more about you on today's show. It was great. And, I just want to kind of highlight the high level yet fundamental elements of leadership and managing of people and getting to know people that shines through in everything that you talk about. And that to me is the fundamentals of everything, right? Making people know that they matter, they're listened to, they're cared for, they're safe. And then when you have the foundation of that, then everything those are, to go back to what you said, those are the little things, but they're really big things, like you said earlier. So I can't thank you enough for taking time to be on the show. Thank you so much. And I'll echo what you said earlier, sending thoughts and prayers to those who lost their lives on this day in 1941, Pearl Harbor. Any closing thoughts?
No, just thank you, John. I'm blessed. I got a great team, the best in the industry, and that's really makes things easy, and I think that's important. But thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, well, keep on doing great things, and I can't wait till the world gets back to normal. I feel like it's very soon, and I feel like everything's kind of around the corner, and I can't wait to start traveling a lot. So thanks so much, Joe. Thanks everybody for listening, and thanks, Joe. Have a good day. Stay on for just a second, Joe.